start with the rich because you like to start with the good news.
Yeah, sure. Of course. Pat writes an article called the walkthrough. Walkthrough. I was going to say the walkthrough. I was going to say the breakdown. The breakdown's not right. The walkthrough, which goes through every single game in crazy detail. It's up and it's on rotoworld.com, NBCSportsEdge.com. You do a great job with it every single week. So let's talk a couple here in terms of fantasy rich. Give us one fantasy rich matchup this week.
Yeah, so I like the Lions and the Dolphins. The Lions, they just got...
And see, we just said that we did the thing with the Tua. That makes sense. Look at our
the transitions on the show.
I mean, just right. I'm just.
You wouldn't know it's the end of the week.
No.
The Lions, maybe not the most fantasy-rich game environment, if you were watching them against the Cowboys, right?
Okay.
But now they get a Dolphins defense that's kind of like the Cowboys defense with the difficulty turned down. And, very similar in terms of the pass rush is the strength of this defense, but they're vulnerable in the secondary. They're banged up in the secondary, and you can beat them with a quick passing game, which is a perfect fit, not just for how the Lions want to attack, but also for who we care about in fantasy. Then on the other side of this game, you have a Dolphins passing game that is actually in the games Tua Tagovailoa has finished fairly aggressive. They have a 6% pass rate over expected in those games, and that's really important because you can attack the Lions however you want. It's really up to the opposing offense. They don't defend the pass. They don't defend the run. They rank 32nd in efficiency allowed per dropback, 32nd in PFF's coverage grades. They have a weak pass rush. They're 31st in efficiency allowed per rush. So it's really up to you. If Mike McDaniel is aggressive in this game, we could see volume. We could see efficiency from the Dolphins, and that could help the Lions get pushed to the air as well.
Barry, hearing all of that, on the Lions side of things, this is an offense that has had an up and down year. Is there anybody you like that gets a little bit of a matchup bump to take advantage of some of Miami's deficiencies on defense?
I don't think so. To me, I mean, you're starting all the obvious guys. You're starting Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're starting DeAndre Swift. You're starting T.J. Hockenson. I could see using Jamal Williams, who got a bunch of goal line work even when DeAndre Swift was active here. So I could see you using Jamal Williams as a flex. He comes in at running back 27 from me this week. But I'm not sitting there going, well, let me see if I can figure out a way to get Josh Reynolds into my lineup.
You're not streaming Jared Goff necessarily.
No. I mean, I have Goff as a QB2 this week. He's number 13 for me.
Pat, on the Dolphins side, we know Tirico and Jalen Waddle aren't going anywhere from lineups, but Tua, Mostert, who's been incredible this year, although a little bit of a knee maintenance this week, and then Gesicki's kind of a wild card as well. Is there anybody in that category that gets the bump?
I think Mostert's a pretty strong start in this game environment. Like I said, you can run on the Lions too, and if the passing game's going, they're scoring points, that's going to be good for Mostert too, and if he doesn't have a huge volume workload, and that's not really his game anyway. He's an efficiency back, he's a speed back. He's coming off the second highest snap share of the season so far, so I like him a lot. Gesicki, I mean, he's a play for a touchdown, but he has a pretty strong red zone role, so I think you can put him in. Tight end's pretty weak this year.
Lions defense are tied for the third most touchdowns allowed to opposing tight ends as well. So if you're in that touchdown dependent tight end range where you're looking for a guy that needs to get into the end zone, Gesicki may be a pretty good bet as well. Mostert, to your point, makes my love list this week, and Tua is a top 5 play.
One more fantasy-rich matchup this week. Cardinals traveling to Minnesota. Minnesota's favored by 3.5 points. The over-under line at 49. Pat, do you see a lot of vulnerable defense in this one?
I do. I mean, the Cardinals' defense is quite vulnerable, and when the Vikings have been playing vulnerable secondaries, they've tended to be aggressive. Entering their bye, playing the Dolphins, they had an 11% pass rate over expected. They've been aggressive in those types of situations. Now they get a defense that ranks 31st in dropback success rate. They're 30th in PFF's coverage grades. They're 29th in PFF's pass rush grades. You can drop back against this defense frequently without worrying too much. I think we could see passing volume up in this game. I think we could see the Vikings passing efficiently. That could help the Cardinals get pushed to the air. The Cardinals have resisted getting pushed to the air. They were not interested in getting in a shootout with the Eagles. They've been run first this season, but that could change a little bit with DeAndre Hopkins back, with Robbie Anderson ramping up. They now have a chance to click a little bit against a Vikings defense that ranks 31st in coverage grade.
Barry, I remember Irv Smith appearing on the love list this week, so he's somebody that gets a little bit of a matchup bump here. When you look at Minnesota's offense, is that the case for guys like Cousins and Thielen as well?
Yeah, of course. I mean, certainly, it's as we said here, it's a fantasy-rich environment as well, and so we expect a lot of points to be scored. Cardinals are a bottom 12 pass defense over the last 4 weeks. I mean, look, as bad as Andy Dalton played last week against Arizona, he still was a top 5 fantasy quarterback last week. And so Cousins, off of the bye, they've had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. The game is not in prime time. The game is in Minnesota. two things that bode well for Kirk Cousins and Adam Thielen. I do think both guys are viable this week. Cousins, for me, comes in at QB7, so I'm as a QB1 this week. And then Adam Thielen, for me, obviously you're already starting Justin Jefferson. I mentioned Irv Smith. We like tight ends against Arizona. Juwan Johnson, of course, with the 2 touchdowns last week against them. Adam Thielen, 29 for me this week. So top 30 play.
Pat, on the Arizona side of things, Benjamin and Rondale Moore, 2 interesting players from this that I think you outlined that can get a little bit of a boost here. How do you handle both of those guys going into this game?
Yeah, Eno's played so well with Connor out that I think you'll continue to see him involved. Rondale Moore was in a tough spot last week. He was playing on the outside again. Greg Dortch was getting slot work. That is not where Rondale Moore should be, but I think that was because they just didn't want A.J. Green out there. If Robbie Anderson is in a full-time role, which he was not last week, he was around 20% of the routes last week. He could be up more like 50, 60% of the routes. That means more slot snaps for Rondale Moore. I think he could be a big part of this game if it gets fun.
The fantasy poor matchup of the week is in London. Sorry, London. I feel like you get a lot of these games handed to you. Broncos at Jaguars. Jaguars are 2.5-point favorites in this game. The over-under below 40. It is at 39.5. Pat, what else do I need to say?
Yeah, this is a tough one. We've got a Broncos team that showed last week that Russell Wilson isn't the only problem. He's definitely not playing well, but this is a team that's actually been run first on first down, which means, they're kind of prioritizing the run game. Now, the run game is terrible, so that's not a great thing to do. We also have an offense that's going to be very sleep deprived after Russell Wilson was doing high knees the entire way to London. Got to factor
what else
that
needs to be said?
On the Jaguars side, Trevor Lawrence's accuracy has swung wildly week to week. He was quarterback 27 in completion percentage over expected last week. That was actually worse than Brett Rypien in his spot start for the Broncos. He's now going against an elite Broncos defense. They're first in efficiency allowed per dropback, first in dropback success rate, first in PFF's coverage grades. This is not the type of defense you want to test out your quarterback against if he's struggling with his ball placement. Given that, and given the fact that Travis Etienne is starting to emerge, I could see them going with a run-heavy type of game plan here. And if the Broncos are running inefficiently and too much on the other side, the clock could just be running bleeding plays out of this game.
Looking at this game that's got plenty of its offensive problems, who are the players that still you could start in a way that you don't bench because Denver's defense has been lights out and the
Travis
Jaguars?
Etienne.
You're still starting
That's the entire list.
That's it.
I literally think that's the entire list. I have Sutton at 22.
Okay.
You probably are still starting him. I think last week's.
He got sauced. Lost in the sauce.
He got lost in the sauce. Exactly. Sauce Gardner shut him down. I still prefer him, and weirdly, damning with faint praise, but Russell Wilson is an upgrade over Brett Rypien. So, I think Sutton, again, he's a high-end wide receiver 3 for me this week, but that's normally lower than I would rank him this week. Christian Kirk made the hate list this week. Trevor Lawrence made the hate list. You're not starting Russell Wilson. You don't feel great about either running back in this one. Mike Boone on the IR, so it'll be a committee between Gordon and Murray in a low-scoring game. Does one of them fall into the end zone? Sure, maybe, but you don't feel good about predicting which one it'll be. Gordon played more snaps last week, but Murray got the touchdown. Low-scoring game. You're starting Travis Etienne, and that's it.
A reminder to everybody, go to rotoworld.com, read Pat Kerrane's The Walkthrough for every matchup. You got the appetizer today. You got the 3 matchups. You could read every matchup. It's time for last call when we're back, and Austin Eckler will be joining us.
Let's go.
Yep.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and rotoworld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from RotoWorld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.